Computer. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back. So what I want to do today is a class on persuasion. Now, to do that, we're going to do a couple of things. And the most important thing that some of you may be thinking is, okay, we're getting closer and closer to the assessment period in this course. What are we going to be doing for the assessment? So we will be covering very directly what we will be looking for in your opinion pieces that you'll be writing starting from next week. But first, I want to get there via two things. The first one is an improv role-playing game that I'd like to do. And I have done this online once, but normally this is a physical exercise that works really well physically. But we're still working out the kinks of how we do this in an online format. But I will tell you how to do it, and hopefully that helps a lot in terms of our persuasion. Following that, we're going to then tell a story about a moment of persuasion and explore what happened there. And then the final part of the course today, we're going to turn to, okay, what are we doing in our opinion pieces? How do we convince people in writing opinion pieces or other forms of writing? Then also, what precisely do you need to do to get the perfect marks in your opinion pieces later in the semester? Now, what I'm going to do is, for this first part, I'm just trying to wait until we get the normal number of people joining in because I don't want to give these instructions 3 times. They're a little bit complicated. Okay. What I'm going to do in a second is break you all into small breakout rooms of just 2. Within that group of 2, that pair, you're going to do a role-playing exercise. And I'd like you to write down the instructions first. They're pretty simple, but the problem is normally I would be able to sequentially do these things, but unfortunately I can't talk to you all while you're in the breakout rooms. So I have to give you all of these instructions first. Within your breakout room of 2, you will have 2 roles. One person, and you'll get to swap in this, you'll both get a chance to do this. One person, I would like you to imagine that you are from a time 500 years ago. This is a time of superstition, a time when religious doctrine ruled the world and fear of outsiders was very high. It was a time in Europe that led to things like the Spanish Inquisition, people burning people at the stake, witch burning, things like that. Sean has something to say about that, I don't know. Yeah, I think he was saying nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition. That's not where I was going with this. I was going with more a time of witch burning and clearly xenophobia, but also a lot of hostility to people inside communities. You're from a time 500 years ago, but you have stepped through a wormhole and arrived here in 2020 and somehow landed in a Zoom breakout room. Normally I can say physically we've arrived in this lecture theatre or something like that, but somehow you've landed in this Zoom breakout room. The other person in that group, you have just seen this person, they're looking a little bit confused, and you would like to be welcoming. You'd like to help them, you'd like to make them feel as comfortable as possible. However, you know that in 2 minutes' time, you're going to get a call on your smartphone. Can you explain to this person from 500 years ago that this is not the work of the devil, some sort of unholy witchcraft, that it is maybe safe? Okay, if you happen to have more than 2 in your group, just have 2 people that are from 500 years ago. So first things in the group is decide if you're from the time traveler from 500 years ago or the person from now explaining the smartphone. All right, any questions before I put you in breakout rooms?
Yes, do we have to tell the truth?
Your choice, Rainer, your choice.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll give you 2 minutes and I'll give you a warning when it's time to go. Join your breakout rooms now.
And we get an audience. Excellent. Even better.
I don't want to ruin it. All right, I'll leave again.
Will, I was really excited for this activity, but no one else joined my room. Could you just put me in one so I can just observe or
Yeah, of
participate
course.
this time?
Jeremy.
Yeah.
Move to breakout room. Cool. There you go.
Hi, sorry, I got here late. Are we going into rooms?
We are, but don't worry about it now. People will come back in a second. In fact, I'll close the rooms now.
I've just joined, sorry.
Oh, don't worry about it. This one's a tiny activity and we'll come back and do some more in a second.
Okay. Can I ask you a question then, Will?
Of course you can, Susan.
I know I've been very flat out with health work and COVID, and it's been pretty difficult. But just with the loading up the literature, you do that on the Wattle discussion board?
Yeah. So we will be covering, this class will be devoted a whole chunk of it to that, but yes.
Nice, thanks.
Will, I accidentally escaped my room.
It's
Don't
okay.
worry.
I didn't mean to.
I came back as well. Sarah, I came back as well.
I
Don't
just
worry.
left.
Don't worry.
Sorry, Helen.
She just abandoned me. She abandoned
I
me.
was really the person back in time because I clicked the wrong button.
She got
Sorry,
scared of the
Helen.
smartphone and she ran away.
Fair enough. I get it.
So you're all still staying COVID free up there in the ACT?
Well, fingers crossed. I got my COVID test on the weekend and I'm free. So.
Did they find a brain when they put the nasal swab in?
Oh my God, they got straight to the tickle zone.
Yeah.
Oh, that was some strong tickling. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you very much for that. So, first question. Who is getting burnt at the stake? And here you can either put your hand up or you can just start talking or you can throw it in the chat. Is anyone getting burnt at the stake for this crazy smartphone invention? Harley.
Yeah, I'm definitely, I had no chance. Everything I did, I'm like, wait a minute. That doesn't make any sense. They didn't have mirrors then. I can't use a mirror analogy. I can't use the word a meter. A meter doesn't exist.
Fair enough. Can't use the word a meter. So not necessarily the words I would have thought you need for this. But...
I was trying to do like it's like just a conversation from distance thing. And then I'm like, wait, none of this makes any sense to a person 500 years ago.
Fair. Hang on, Harley, this is your choice that you got burnt at the stake. You were explaining and you reckon you didn't do a very good job?
No, I did a terrible job.
Okay. Can I just check with Harley's partner? Are you burning Harley at the stake?
Yes, I totally am.
Okay, cool. Just one small point on this, and it will come up over and over again. We use this exercise quite a lot because it talks about so many aspects of science communication, and I get to chance to explore heaps of them. But first thing that I often think is important is we should be self-critical, of course. We should say, all right, that explanation was not great. But who gets to choose in the end if an explanation was adequate or not? I don't know if that was a rhetorical question or not.
It's the listener.
It's the listener. Yes, it's the listener. Listener gets to choose. In this scenario, it's the time traveler gets to say if it was adequate or not. Don't be those people that throw yourself under the bus. I know we work with heaps and heaps of scientists around the country, wonderful people, very self-critical because that's part of the job is to assess anything. Sometimes we are more critical than we need to be of ourselves. Okay, Simon, you're getting burned or you're burning your partner? Put your hand up if you're burning your partner as well. Simon.
Oh, well, I got the challenge of trying to convince a 500-year-old skeptic, Raina, which was a joy. Thanks very much, Will. So with the short time frame, I just said, so this technology that can speak is not magic. Have you ever experienced an echo? Have you been in a place where you've shouted your name to prove that you exist and heard that voice come back? Well, this technology is like an echo. It's a way of carrying that sound, but we've learned a lot of things in 500 years. And then I offered him a crash course. I'm trying to make money out of Rainer because I'm assuming he's like a Highlander or something. So
Nice.
probably a good
Going
person
straight to
have
making
on board.
money out of him. That's nice, Simon. That's great. Got to say, echo is awesome. That's actually the first time I've heard that metaphor for doing this, and I've heard a lot of different metaphors. We'll come to that in a second. Why are you getting burnt though? Are you getting burnt?
Rainer, that's over to you.
It's hard to challenge somebody 500 years ago because, maybe you would go straight for the pitchfork. But I got so far as to saying, capturing echoes sounds like witchcraft to me, and I wanted to hear more.
Okay.
But I could get the echo. I think you could get that.
You wanted to hear more. But
Yes.
were you burning or not, or you're still ready to hear more?
Well, I was collecting some kindling, but I was prepared to.
See what I have to deal with?
Yes,
Collecting kindling. Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Cool. Thank you, Rainer. Thank you, Simon. Susie, are you getting burnt, or are you burning your friend?
I think I might be getting burnt. I used some things. I used a similar analogy to Simon, where I said it was like when you go to the seashore and you can hear the ocean in a seashell.
Yeah.
But then it completely fell apart because then she asked one question. She was like, "But how does it work?" And I was like, "Oh no! Like it's everything has come to pieces." So I said it was like that when someone speaks, it moves the air, and that the phone can pick up the movement in the air. And I was really trying to I break it down to its smallest possible parts, and I think from there it just completely disintegrated.
Okay. Fair enough. Your partner, who is that?
Actually, it was something I'd never met before, so I'm not sure.
Anyway, okay. All right. One question on that. I like the seashell. It's from the natural world, and we'll come to that in a second. But just a quick poll here. Not actually. I won't put the poll up. But how many people use one of these every day? Put your hand up in the screen. Put your hand up in there. All right. I'm assuming that it is actually all of you. It is. I don't think there would be any of us that don't use a smartphone every single day. All right. Put your hand up again. Take your hand down and put it up again. If you could actually tell me how this works from go to woe. I'm assuming at this point there's a lot of, "Ooh, no, not me. No, I got nothing." I know that there's chips and electricity. Simon says yes, he can explain all of it from go to woe. What I will say here, and I'm not going to ask Simon to explain a mobile phone from go to woe how it works, is that we are all very comfortable using this and very comfortable using it every single day of our lives. But we don't actually need to know how it works to be comfortable with it. The same analogy applies for a whole bunch of modern technology, computers, cars, all sorts of things that we have used day in, day out for a long time. And we have an understanding of the risk and the dangers and the safety, but we don't actually know how it works. So one of the first things that I would say is many of us in the scientific world err on thinking about things in terms of how things work. We often like the sciencey explanation that says, okay, so there's radio waves, and radio waves can be understood by computers if we something binary, and we put them all together, blah, blah, blah. All really complicated. And how something works might be useful for some people, but is not necessary for a lot of people. Okay, now Sean is starting to say here something. I want to check with people who was very happy with the explanation of the smartphone. Who was like, "Oh, this is not witchcraft. This is a smartphone." Hands up, anyone that was really quite happy with that. Daniel.
Yeah, so I was Sean's partner, and he was definitely on the way to the stake until he told me that it was endorsed by the Pope and that it sort of carries the voices of angels. And And I thought, well, that makes sense.
No, well, nearly. I was trying to get across that the voice was being carried by angels, and it was a device, a holy artifact that had been found in a cave near Antioch. But when somebody else talks into it, their voice is carried by angels to mine, and these angels are a group of angels called 5G.
Okay, awesome. Awesome in one way, and we'll see the flaws in a second there. So one of the things that I really want to pull out here that is the positive about this, and this is one of the key aspects of this exercise, is that if we are to convince anyone, we have to step into their language. We have to step into the words that they use, the language that they use, the world that they understand. So, to convince someone from 500 years ago about a smartphone, we have to use words that they understand. And I didn't define that, but you all had a rough idea, and talk about things that they understand. For example, seashells, they would have had seashells. I think they probably would have had mirrors. They would have understood reflections. They would have understood echoes. And we'll come to some more metaphors and analogies in a bit, which are really useful. We have to use words and language that they understand, as opposed to things that may be everyday for us, but are not everyday for people 500 years ago. Computers, satellites, radio waves, electricity. What were the other ones that we had? Anyway, I'm sure a lot of you can imagine a whole bunch of words that you might use to describe this to, to a 12-year-old kid. Find a 12-year-old kid that hasn't seen one before. I don't know, that's really weird. But those sorts of words we can't use from 500 years ago. Now, the key thing here, these words are jargon. And so in all of our science communication, what we have to do is try and step into their language. Now, what was the problem with what Sean did? He's stepping into their world. He's saying it was endorsed by the Pope, and these voices are carried by angels. So he's stepping into their world and using things that are relevant to them. However, what's the problem, Sean?
Oh, I lied my pants off.
That's it. Yeah, you lied. And what gets you burnt at the stake faster than anything else?
Being discovered.
Being discovered lying. Yes. You technically can lie, and I've had many people that have said, yeah, this is a gift from God, and people are like, oh, cool, it's a gift from God. I'm fine with it now. But the instant you are discovered and saying something that you know to be not true, you yourself, if you believe that it is a gift from God, I'm not judging that. But what I'm saying is, if you yourself know that, okay, the voices are carried via radio waves, it's not angels, it's not, I don't know whether it's endorsed by the Pope or not, but that that's not to be true, then being caught lying will be the fastest thing that will get you burnt at the stake.
But on Mitchell's point there, he said is an analogy and a lie. I mean, in some ways, saying that there's something carrying the voice from this to this, is this like really stretching an analogy to a point where somebody else can understand it?
Yeah, it's stretching it to the point where it breaks and becomes a lie. So an analogy is a pathway that sounds similar. So, for example, this is like when you can hear it in a seashell. So something like that, or this is like one of my favorite analogies, and I will come to this in a second, analogies and metaphors that people might use. You know how it's like sending a letter, except we have a different means of sending a letter, or it's like sending smoke signals or church bells, something like that. Means of communicating over longer distances that would have existed in that time, allows them to start thinking, oh, it's like a letter, but okay, what's different here? Okay, it's moving faster, doing different sorts of things. You haven't said anything that's untrue there at all. Then you haven't necessarily explained all of how it's working. You're just explaining it's like that. That's fine. That's fine. There's a big difference though of saying it is a letter, because it's not, but you're never going to say that. If you say something is a gift from God, is something, then you are putting in the realm of scientific verifiability, and you can be shown to be false. So were there other people that were happy with their partner's explanation? some of the time travelers. Do you want to jump in and say what you enjoyed about their explanation? Amelia.
I think my partner was very quick to assure me that what would happen next wouldn't hurt me or wasn't going to harm me in any way,
Awesome.
and kind of stepping through the steps of what will happen. And I think that that's something to like kind of, yeah, it would have been quite helpful to know that this wasn't going to, I guess, cause a lightning bolt to strike me where I stood or something like that. So yeah, that was quite useful.
How did you reassure your partner that it wouldn't hurt them?
I can't quite remember who my partner was.
It was me. Basically, just sort of ran through, just saying that in a moment, there's going to be a noise that comes out of this little wee box, and it's going to play some music, and the music, it's going to be there, but there's no orchestra, there's no musicians, but don't worry because it's not going to hurt you. Pretty much along those lines. Just, you know, a big hug, really.
So when someone is in this kind of situation, we often have to think about, okay, well, we always have to think about, okay, what do they care about? What do they value? What are they oriented towards? And in this point, this person from 500 years ago, yes, they still care about, you know, the structure of their world and if things are heresy or not, probably. But right now, they're focused first and foremost on, okay, is this thing going to hurt me? What in this world that I'm brand new to is going to be dangerous? What's going to hurt me? And if we focus far more on their values, what they care about, then we're far more likely to convince them that it's safe. And remember, this doesn't require you to say how the smartphone works. Instead, it requires you to think, okay, what will reassure them? What will soften that blow? What will make things easier for them? Okay. Now I'm going to put you back in the same breakout rooms for the flip side of this. Hopefully, I know that there's a few more people in here since then. Hopefully it'll still work, but if you get 3 people in your breakout room, don't worry, just have 2 time travelers and 1 explainer. So if you're in the same breakout room, flip it around. The other person is now from 500 years ago. But key difference, on the path through the wormhole, they got their finger caught on the edge of the wormhole and it hurts an awful lot. Yes, Susie, exactly like that. Hurts an awful lot. It might be broken. Person from today, can you convince them to put it into the X-ray machine? An X-ray machine. 2 minutes. Open all rooms. Let's see how many we've got. All right, I'll assign a few of you that don't have rooms to. I can't add new breakout rooms. Oh, I'll just put you all in extra rooms.
Hello again.
Hi there. Did you have a room? Did you fall out of a room or?
Oh no, I'm just joining now. Yeah.
I'll put you in a room for a sec, but it won't be that much longer.
No worry. Thank you.
No worries.
I feel so sorry for Daniel because I just kept screaming in pain.
Okay. All right. Sean, you've given me the first thing I just wanted to explain. That's awesome. So one of the interesting things about doing this exercise is that I define one aspect of the audience very quickly. You know, they're from 500 years ago, time of superstition, blah, blah, blah. But I don't explain very much more about what they care about, what they're like as a human. And so I get often different types of people. Some people are like, oh, this is all great. I love this modern world. This is so cool. Let me put my finger in things. That's great. And then I get these other people who are like, you know what? I love witch burning. Witch burning is the best bit of our world.
God.
And no matter what you say, I will put you on the fire. So it's almost like there are modern audiences now who are similar. Okay, maybe a little bit facetiously, they're not that far on the spectrum. But there are definitely people who will be very happily convinced of things due to a whole variety of different things. And there will some people who will never be convinced of things. Maybe because they're cantankerous, maybe they're cranks, maybe they're ideologically opposed to whatever it is that you're suggesting. But people are different and they have very different convincibility on different sorts of things. We'll come back to that as we go. So who's getting burnt for the, Amelia's getting burnt. That was very quick. Or did you want to say something on that last point?
Oh no, I think I was properly burnt. I just, I got to, so firstly, I tried to compare myself to a physician, but then I realized that I didn't really know. All that I could assure them is that we weren't going to do any bloodletting, which might have been how they'd normally get the ghosts out of their blood. But instead, I was going to get them to like put their hand on this platform, and it would be like, you know, at confession, but you don't have to speak. We'd just find out what's wrong with you. And I think at that point I got burnt.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Just to confirm, your partner, Amelia, or Amelia's partner, is she going to get burnt for that?
It was an interesting argument. So possibly just singed at the moment. We didn't kind of get all the way to the end.
Okay. All right. One thing to observe there. Well, first of all, Amelia, you know, you're drawing things from their world. You know, like bloodletting, but it's going to be, you know, not as painful. It's going to be nice. But the next thing to just observe there is that there are actually three outcomes of this scenario. What are the three outcomes?
I guess the one outcome is that they let us.
Yep, one success.
Finger.
So there's success. Scan the finger. What's another one?
Yeah, the other one would be burning.
Yep.
And then I guess the other outcome is, yeah, something in between.
Where we're continuing to have a conversation.
Yeah.
So what I want to do is just reframe the one that's in between and take that as a success. In all of our efforts to persuade people of anything, we've got to recognize if they're continuing to ask questions, still involved in the conversation, maybe they haven't taken everything on board yet, then we've got to treat that at least as a win in some sense. Yes, if they're all the way down the end and they're burning us, then okay, that's clear. We've got a failure there. But
what?
Yeah, Amelia.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to ask. I think the main difficulty that I had is, trying to relate to them, but suddenly realizing that I really know very little about what would be relatable, and I think therefore, like, possibly even making things worse by maybe making comparisons that would offend someone from that time. So, like, I guess, how do you know when you are so ignorant about where they're coming from and what their understanding or views might be?
Great question. Did anyone ask any questions at the start of their conversation?
I did. I asked how they felt and what they wanted, and I found out that they didn't want a doctor, they wanted a priest.
Okay.
So I agreed that we would go somewhere where we could get help for their pain, and also a priest would be there. And I'm pretty confident that they have people from different religions at hospitals. So I wasn't lying.
No,
but
indeed.
I found what they wanted.
Absolutely. Awesome. So we'll come to the values aspect of that in just a second. But the asking questions, I think if you're unsure of what will work in their time and their world, in their language, the first thing that we can always do is do some research. So if that might mean in this scenario, asking, okay, what do you normally do in these sorts of scenarios? Someone breaks their finger, where do you normally go? Might be a great way to start. Or if you're trying to convince someone in the modern world of something, asking them at the very beginning, where are you up to? I did it at the start of this course. I did it in a lot of courses, asking, okay, where is your understanding of this topic, or what are you thinking at the moment? The more that we can understand a little bit about people at the beginning, the more that we're likely to tailor as much to them as possible. Now, sometimes you can't, of course, do that. If you're writing, as we'll talk about later, you can't see your audience right away, but you can do a lot of research on, okay, what venue am I publishing in, and what sorts of things do they normally write, or what other demographic information can I get about them? So I think the first thing that you can always do is find out what will offend them, and by asking them, and put things in their terms a little bit more in that way. Yes, indeed. Broken bones would be very familiar. They certainly would have had pathways for dealing with broken bones in those times. Okay, anyone else getting burnt here for the X-ray machine? Fantastic. All right. So who then is happily putting their finger into the X-ray machine?
I'm quite happily putting my finger into the machine.
Excellent.
Sarah just used really, really simple metaphors. So she just talked about a box that shines a bright light. And then to help me understand the bright light, she said, when you hold your hand up to the sun and you can see the light through the web of your fingers.
Awesome.
She said it's like that. And then when I was still worried about this box, she said, but look, the priests are happy to use it. We established that monks were happy to use it. The Pope's happy to use it. And so I thought, okay, I actually got to the point where I was willing to put my finger.
Awesome. So straight away, we've got a metaphor from a world that they understand, a physical metaphor. And in fact, Sarah, have you played this game before? Because I often tell people that one afterwards. That's a great one.
Yeah, she has.
Yeah, I did it in Speaking of Science with you.
Yeah, you did, didn't you? They're good, and that means you learned. So that's awesome. Yeah, like there's a metaphor straight away from their world that they will understand. The skin of your fingers, the skin of your eyelids, or you often hear people talking about you put a stick into the water and it bends. Light does something weird, and you can see something there. Or ancient times, they used to hold eggs up to candles to see if they were fertilized or not. Some may still do that. I don't know. Do people with chickens do that still? I guess you don't want to eat it.
Yeah,
There you go.
do
Stephanie.
that.
There you go.
It is called candling.
Yeah, so called candling. So all of these are things from their world that would help them to understand what might be a metaphor for what the X-ray machine is going to do. But then you did a second thing there, Sarah, in the sense of reinforcing this via social pressures, social networks, ideas that people that she trusts, so for example, religious leaders or something like that, use this with no qualms. So again, we're not explaining how the X-ray machine works. We're not saying, look at how cool my big shiny machine is. Instead, we're focused on, oh, a lot of people use it. It's safe. Don't need to worry about it.
Kim offered to use it before me.
Awesome.
And to show me it being used on her and that it was safe. So that was reassuring.
That's fantastic. That's cool. Yeah. Did anyone else do that, offering to use it themselves? So straight away, what that is doing is bearing the risk, taking on the risk yourself, and people will be far more comfortable when they have seen that someone else is on the line with that. So, any other questions or comments, things that you thought worked interestingly or worked well at this point? So we'll come back to this exercise a little bit throughout this course, through this class today. But the key things that I would say, if you are to convince someone of something, whether something is safe or whether to take on that risk and put your hand into the X-ray machine, first and foremost, you need to understand who they are. And you know what I'm going to do? Oh, I don't have an eraser. Oh my God. What I want you to do is when you are talking to anyone, then you need to understand who they are as an audience. Now, there's at least two directions that we can take what defines an audience. I could make a three-dimensional chart here, but we don't need to worry about that. Firstly, on one axis of the chart are demographic information. Use the sleeve. I could use the sleeve. You know it's not going to work. It's not going to work. Demographic information. So at this point, I gave you someone from 500 years ago, from a time of high superstition. I didn't give you very much more than that, but that is some form of demographic information. You would know a little bit about their level of education, the sorts of things that shape their world. Same too, we can know demographic information about audiences all the time here in Australia. How educated they are, how young, how old they are, what their cultural background is, all sorts of things like that. And this means that if you are trying to convince a meeting of the International Chemistry Professors Association, you would use different language from if you were talking to undergraduate chemists to people who had never done a chemistry class in their life. So demographic information is very important when we're trying to convince people of this, because it tells us what language we can use and what metaphors will work. But the second part of audience definition is almost orthogonal to that. So I can put it on a different axis here. And whilst there is a little bit of bleeding here, what I want to put in the different axis is what they care about, their values. Very hard to write with chalk. No wonder they don't do it anymore. So this points to, firstly, what does the time traveler care about in the second scenario?
You might care more about fixing their finger than about like the witch stuff.
They care about their finger. Yes, they're in pain. They care about getting some resolution to their finger. They still do care about other things. They care maybe about their religious society or whatever their those kinds of things are. But right now they're extremely motivated by their pain. The first person might be motivated by safety, or they might be motivated by other things as well. But also, you know, we can also put on the values chart, we can put, are they someone that loves witch burning or doesn't like witch burning? And so that might differ there. What I want to do with that is suggest that first and foremost, if we're trying to convince someone of anything, then we have to pay attention to who they are demographically and who they are in terms of their values and what they care about. Any questions on that? Awesome.
I have a little question.
Yeah.
Just quickly, with values, I know that you can, when you're sort of researching your target audience, you sort of get a general idea, but like, are you sort of making a lot of assumptions with what they value, you know, and like, how do you really get to the bottom of what it is that they value? Can you do that just by looking at work within the platform that they're viewing or whatnot? But like, is it not, yeah, are you not sort of making quite a lot of assumptions about what they value?
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing. And I've got an exercise that I haven't run online before, and it works well physically, and it might work well here online. It's a stressful exercise, but maybe we'll put it into that in a second. It is far more challenging to understand someone's values than it is to understand their demographics. We can read some demographics from people physically, or by their bearing, or by what they're wearing, or by you know, if they've turned up to that conference, or if they're reading that newspaper. We can read some sorts of ideas about. Oh, that's the chalk I've been looking for. Thank you, Raina. Yes. We can read a lot of demographic information, and demographic information may give us some idea about values. So for example, if someone's an international chemistry professor, they probably do care about chemistry. They probably do care about the state of chemistry in the world. So we can infer a few things, but do we know that that person that we're talking to also wants to solve world hunger, or also wants to make $1 billion, or also, there's a whole bunch of things here. So, all right, Daniel, I'm going to take the risk, and we're going to do a second exercise. Again, in breakout rooms, we'll keep it the same room of 2 so you don't have to introduce yourself to someone new. Different instructions this time, not a time traveling instruction. What I would like you to do is, once you get into your breakout room, you're going to take turns. One person is going to go first. And then we'll come back, and then the other person will go the second time. What I would like you to do is think of something that drives you wild, that makes you insanely angry. You're incensed, you're furious. Now, I want this to be something real, something that does make you furious. So for example, it could be something to do with your share house, something to do with your lab, something to do with the difficulties of COVID, or people that don't, anyway, I want you to think about something real that drives you furious. When you get into the breakout room, choose who's going to go first, and the first person is going to rant for 2 minutes to that second person. The second person is going to say nothing. They're going to sit there and look into the Zoom screen and just listen. At this point, I want you to keep your face neutral. I don't want you to say anything. I don't want you to nod. I don't want you to smile. I just want you to go like this. Okay? Into your breakout rooms. If you're in a group of 3, just choose one person to do it, and then we'll go from there. And then we'll come out and have a quick digest, and then flip back in.
Will, I joined a bit late. I'm not sure that I have an existing breakout room to join.
I'll put you in one, and you can just listen in.
Thanks.
Loving those books there, Rachel. That's a very learned background.
It's fake, right?
I know, right? I know, right? But squad goals.
Yeah. I mean, my background's my bedroom, and that's just not okay.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I get that. I get that.
That was therapeutic. That felt great.
This is one of the best exercises I have ever done.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, just on that, so 2 people have said that was therapeutic. That felt great. Okay. How many people hated that and thought that was really horrible? Just put your hand up or put your...
Are you looking for the, it was really stressful to not get any kind of reception for what you're saying?
Vaguely. Did you find that stressful?
I've had a lot of practice. My life pretty much is like that, me ranting and people ignoring me, so it's fine.
Right.
It was just, I found it hard just to get going. And then once I got going, my partner told me to quieten down in the background because I was really getting excited.
That's fantastic.
I woke my husband up, I think.
Well, I'm glad for that as well. Okay.
It was very hard not to react.
Okay, so you were a listener?
Yeah, so well, we did both, but it was very hard not to like nod and agree on things. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, you did both already? I'm going to send you back in to do it. You're going to have to do it again.
Oh, sorry.
No, don't worry. Couple of things just to observe there. That's not the purpose of this activity for us now, but they're useful things to think about. One is that it's really hard to keep your face still. Someone is expressing all of this emotion. People want to respond. We all want to respond because we're human. We like to engage. So just if you're ever doing a public speech or anything like that, or presentation ever again, just remember that the audience actually want to help you out. They're sitting there thinking, oh no, I want you to do well. I don't want you to fail. I want you to do really well. So just remember that one. It is really hard to sit there neutrally. Second thing, probably about 10 to 15% of people find that really easy to rant and could have gone for half an hour. Probably historically, this is what I remember from physically running this exercise. 85% of people say, no, that was one of the most horrible things I've ever had to do. I'm seeing a lot of nodding here. I found it incredibly traumatic. Any time I've done it, it's horrible. I hate it. It's an unnatural form of communication to just bludgeon over the top of people and keep talking. Ranting isn't a helpful form of communication, and it's also it's not natural to have such a one-sided conversation. All right, everyone's going to flip around. So if you're in a group of 3, just choose one other person to rant. If you're in a group of 2, the other person rants now. Same rules, 2 minutes, and the other person just listen, keep your face neutral. Back to your breakout rooms. Wonder if we might swap the milk into this one. I was thinking it's maybe more convenient on the other side, because it's one of the most. Oh yeah, that's true. We don't have to do it just yet. I was just thinking it through, but I think as we're coming here, it's kind of more convenient on that.
Hey, Will, sorry.
Yeah.
I had to reconnect. Can you put me back into 11, please?
Assign to 11. There you go.
Thank you.
Welcome back. Thank you all for doing that. I know that that is a horrible process. Did anyone love it?
Oh, I enjoyed it.
Ashley liked it.
I'm really worried what that says about me. We talked about it in our group, but like some of us found it really easy to rant, and now I'm worried if that's a bad sign that you find it easy just to kind of go off. But we did talk about, we didn't discuss really serious topics, so that might have been where why that was a little bit easier.
Could be. Look, I've got some assumptions about that, which might talk about some of the issues in society a little bit, but we don't need to drill into that right now. Sean, your hand's up.
Yeah, I just want to say in terms of on that, the juxtaposition between, because I had Daniel and Justin very passionately talked about his brother not letting him play his console. But then the flip side of it was Daniel talked about finding out about what companies were doing about climate change, and so they were kind of like two ends of the rage spectrum.
No, that's awesome, but you're jumping ahead. So you're stealing my material for the next bit. That's okay. Mia.
I just found it really, really hard to continue ranting without feedback.
Yep.
So I feel like if someone had engaged with me, I could have really gone to town for a longer period, but I was struggling to feel like the last 20 seconds without any engagement and even disagreement, so that then I could fire up about, no, this is why I'm right. Or empathy with yes and agreement. So I feel like if there'd been engagement, it would have been easier for me to rant, which I found really interesting.
Yep, absolutely. I feel often that we run out of steam when there isn't that path there. Helen?
Yeah, so I was actually going to say the same thing, that so I think my poor partner Sarah found it very difficult to keep ranting because I was poker faced, but when I was ranting about roundabout, she was nodding and she was engaging in the conversation, and I just kept going. No, it's a really human reaction to do, right? When someone's really having a rant at you, you nod, you're like, yeah, you're obviously fired up about this. And yeah, that feedback loop, like you just push through because you're like, yes, they agree with me, let's go.
And how powerful is that, to know that you can cut off people just by not responding?
look, if you want to use that for evil, definitely you could. Raina?
I found the ranting easier than the not reacting.
Okay.
Part of the reason is that because I know I actually have sort of a tendency to talk over people, and it sometimes, it takes me a while to work out that they're not listening anymore. But so I've consciously trained myself to get those cues.
Yep.
Plus I had some training in reflective listening and all those sorts of things. And that's become so ingrained in me that I find it very hard to not do that. So I had to do the times table in my head to keep and I only could do that till Simon directly said, "What do you think?" And then I had to react. That's just that I couldn't then go and totally ignore that. That just is inhuman.
Too many years in front of unresponsive audiences.
Yes.
I go into attack mode.
Manuela.
Yeah, I just wanted to reflect on what you said before, that it's a really hard exercise to do, but I wonder whether it's hard because we just put in the spot rather than, if something does happen that makes you furious, then it will be really easy to rant about it.
I don't doubt. There would be moments in your life where you can really go. I mean, this is it's hard for a number of reasons. One is I put you right on the spot and I say, just think of something and go. I don't give you a chance to rehearse or anything like that.
We're not actually feeling those, feelings of anger because.
But luckily, that's not the purpose of this activity. So I will get to the purpose in a second. But we will still get there. Harley.
So I've just did a rant that I've done in person to other people a few times before, just talking about like NBN, and I found it really interesting that what I missed was not just like the sympathy of the other person, but even if they're like arguing against you, the time of hearing what they're saying gives you time to think about your thoughts and really organize what actually is upsetting you. When you just kind of quick fire launch everything off, it almost feels like hollow, the feeling of ranting.
Okay, cool. And Sarah.
Yeah, I just found it interesting that when Belinda did her rant, she literally picked the topic that I was thinking of picking if I had to do it again. So I was vibing with it so much that I felt like I needed to like scream like, yes, I understand, and like I just felt like I needed to join in so badly.
Look, this can be a bit of a bonding exercise as well. Okay, now here comes the purpose of the activity. So what I would now like you to do is quickly scan through the participant list and remember your colleague's name. If you haven't done that, quickly scan through and have a look. Now what I'd like to do, and I don't think we'll get a chance to go through everyone, but we'll ask for volunteers, and if I don't get volunteers, I'll just start calling out names that I can see on the screen here. What I would like you to do is introduce your friend that you just met in your, well, you might have met before, but just were ranting with in the breakout room. But what I want you to use is this specific format. Hi, I'd like you to meet my new friend, Belinda. Belinda cares deeply about, and you can just say it in one word, one sentence, that will be fine, but I don't want to hear the rant. I don't want to hear anything negative. I want to hear positive. So who'd like to go first? Grace has her hand up there physically. Grace, would you like to introduce your friend?
My friend Lauren and I both care very deeply about being considerate of other people in public spaces.
Awesome. Thank you, Grace. Lauren, she kind of gave the introduction for you as well, but do you want to introduce Grace as well?
Guys, this is Grace. She enjoys going to the gym. Yeah.
Thank you, Lauren. Awesome. Jeremy, your hand's up next.
Yes. This is Manuela, and she found that the treatment for cancer is still undisputed. It's still disputed.
Make it positive. What does she care about? What does she care about?
She cares about the cure for cancer.
Okay, cool. All right. And sorry, who was that, Manuela?
Yeah.
Yep. Do you want to introduce Jeremy?
Yes, so this is Jeremy, and it really cares about the environment.
Great, excellent, fantastic. Helen.
Hi, my new friend is Sarah Hughes, and she cares deeply about good bathroom hygiene habits.
Excellent, as everyone should. Sarah.
Hi everyone, this is my friend Helen, and she cares about road safety and appropriate use of indicators on roundabouts.
Thank you. Road safety, that's a good one. Sean.
Yes, I mentioned before, but I have two friends. There's Daniel, who is very passionate about corporate responsibility and climate change. And there's Justin, who is very, very passionate about the participation on gaming consoles within family units.
Fantastic. Daniel, would you like to introduce Sean?
Sean didn't have one for this one, did you?
Okay.
Rant, but for Justin,
we're in a three.
Okay, fair enough.
I'll reintroduce Justin, but yeah, Justin, to echo Sean, is very interested in equity amongst video game playing within a household.
Fantastic. Look, I'm very interested in my children having equity in video game playing in the household too. Amelia.
Hi, I would like you to meet Nicola. Nicola cares deeply about people who are considerate of shared spaces and the actions we can take to make a place feel gender inclusive.
Oh, that's wonderful. Nicola, would you like to introduce Amelia?
Hi everyone, this is my new friend Amelia, and she cares deeply about keeping herself fit and healthy at the gym.
Great. Simon.
Hi, this is my new friend Raina. He prizes punctuality and believes in the wholesome goodness of respecting other people's time.
Excellent. Raina.
This is my new friend Simon, and he cares deeply about how his family feels about his work.
Fantastic. Is anyone else noticing that these breakout rooms seem to be very gendered? Anyway, there's a lot of girls and girls, boys and boys. Anyway, Belinda, would you like to introduce? You're on mute. Don't you hate that?
Yeah, always. So my new friend is Sarah, and she is really passionate about well done car parking within the lines.
Yes. Sarah.
This is my new friend Belinda, and she cares very deeply about sharing the cooking throughout the household amongst everyone.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you for that. Thank you very much for doing that. I understand that it is a challenging exercise to do and to listen to, but it goes back to Daniel's question before. How do we understand about people's values? Now, the purpose of that activity is to say that underneath any rant is not just what is making them angry, but they're only angry because they care about something. I can backfill the rants. You know, people care about people being respectful, or people sharing video game time, or people parking within the lines. I can backfill. I can work out what the negative thing is. But these are all things that you care about in the world. You care about people respecting each other, or you care about the climate, the environment and climate justice, or you care about a whole bunch of other things. And I can understand that based on the introductions, but I can understand what the rants are there. What I want to say is underneath anyone doing anything ever are values. We only do things because we value things. So we will choose where to live, what job to have, what exercise to do, whether to go out and see a movie because we care about things. What I want to say is that, yes, Daniel, it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to find out what people care about. Demographic information, we can get objectively. We can gather that because, you know, we can either see some demographic information on people, or we know what readers of The Australian are like, or anything like that. Or we can do surveys. We can get all of that stuff. But even within a population of 500 international chemistry professors who are education-wise, age-wise, all similar, and maybe even cultural background-wise, probably, but their values differ enormously. So how do we understand values? The only way, I think, is by listening to people and trying to engage and trying to think about people deeply, rather than just saying, okay, that person is 30-year-old white male, therefore X. You know, there's a huge difference between this 30-year-old white male, this 30-year-old white male, of course. So what we need to do is to try and understand, okay, what do people care about? They'll show us a little bit about what they care about in what they say and in their actions. But it's only by deep listening that we'll actually get to a place where we deeply understand what they do care about. Cool. Let's take a 5-minute break. And then, or is 5 minutes enough to make a coffee? How long does it take you to make coffees? 10, 7.
3 minutes and 30 seconds.
3 minutes and 30 seconds. All right, I'll give you 9, then it fits onto the hour. Come back at 10:45. And then I'll tell you a story, and then we'll look at assessment. You need to get firewood. All right, 10:45. See you in a bit. What do I want? Participants. Welcome back. So what I'd like to do now is tell a story. This is a story of persuasion, but it's also a story that I think is really useful for us understanding the relationship between science, government advice, and people taking that advice, and something that we all as science communicators should continue to think about. Now, I'm going to truncate this story because we've got to make sure we do cover all of the assessment that's required after this. Many of you may know this story. If you don't, then if you do, add in bits of information as we go. I want to start, because this is in Italy, I will do it operatic style. And I will start with the background. The background is a little town called L'Aquila. It's in the middle of Italy. in a region, and it looks something like this, or at least it did. Many Italian cities are medieval, Renaissance cities, built on top of each other, have a bunch of things that look like this. This is not necessarily L'Aquila, but it looks mostly like this. This also is not necessarily L'Aquila either, but many Italian towns and cities of a similar ilk. Small streets, alleyways, stone buildings, many of them built 500, 800 years ago. L'Aquila is built on what is now known to be an ancient lake bed. And this is an ancient lake bed that appears to amplify earthquakes. And so the region has had earthquakes quite a lot. Italy in general gets quite a few earthquakes, but this region gets more than most. So in documented history, since the Renaissance, L'Aquila has had earthquakes in 1315, 1349, 1452, 1501, 1646, 1703, 1706, and 1958. The 1703 earthquake killed 5,000 people. Let's add to this background with a cultural response. You can imagine that living in a city with a history of earthquakes, you might involve different ways of responding to earthquakes. Again, the picture is not necessarily L'Aquila, but it makes sense. This quote came from an article that was written a couple of years ago. My father was afraid of earthquakes. So whenever the ground shook, even a little, he would gather us and take us out of the house. We would walk to the little piazza nearby, and the children, we were 4 brothers, and my mother would sleep in the car. My father would stand outside smoking cigarettes with the other fathers until morning. I don't know why they needed to stand around smoking, but anyway, father could have probably had a nap in the car as well. But a long-term cultural response of going outside and spending the night outside after a tremor. That seismograph that we just showed is a meaningless picture for us here, but it comes from a paper that shows that by 1988, it was known that small tremors, and particularly a swarm of tremors in L'Aquila and other areas as well, would be followed by a main shock, a large earthquake, at a 2% chance. So if you have a swarm of tremors, a little bit like this over a period of days, that 2% of times that will be followed by a large shock. Now let's go to 2009. L'Aquila experienced throughout 2009, and in fact, I think starting in 2008, hundreds of minor tremors. Many nights, they would go and sleep in the piazza. In fact, the number of tremors, I think I'm going to show it in a little bit. No, I won't. Started off from 1 to 2 per week. 1 to 2 per week in December of 2008. Gradually scaled up to nearly 1 a day in February. By April, they were getting dozens per day, and up to, just before the earthquake, nearly 100 per day. Enter a citizen scientist. I don't know operatically if this person is a villain or a hero. Your choice. Gianpaolo Giuliani. He had worked for 40 years as a laboratory technician, including 20 years at the Gran Sasso National Laboratory. The Gran Sasso National Laboratory is a very high-profile lab. They've done a whole bunch of work. They did a lot of work on the, what's the black hole detection? Gravitational waves, yep. So they do really high-profile work. And Gianpaolo Giuliani had been a lab tech there for 20 years. Early 2009, he decided to deploy a number of homemade radon detectors throughout the region. And he published this data via an open website. He did citizen science. He was a citizen, he cared about this data, and he put it out there on a blog. Now, the science on radon detection and earthquakes is not scientifically proven or accepted. Giuliani, at this point, had yet to publish a single peer-reviewed paper on his radon work, but there is legitimate grounds for a hunch, legitimate grounds for doing science on this, because there are suggestions, perhaps, that radon does fluctuate before a major shock. However, it's not known enough now or then to base action on. Now we come to potentially the true villains in this story. Early April 2009, the National Risk Assessment Team, which is a team of government-appointed scientists and bureaucrats, whose job it is to assess the risk that Italy is facing to various natural disasters, including in this potential to earthquakes. You could imagine a similar panel here in Australia giving evidence on bushfire risk or cyclone risk or something like that. Now, this National Risk Assessment Team was made up of bureaucrats with a background in hydraulic engineering and geophysicists and volcanologists, people who know what they're talking about. They did something unusual here. Every other press conference that the National Risk Assessment Team had ever done had been given in Rome and had been very dry. They would sit and declare what the assessment, the risk assessment was for that month or something like that, get a couple of journalists turning up and answering questions, and then that's it. But in early April 2009, they moved the press conference to L'Aquila in response, perhaps, to both the citizen scientist adding in information into the scenario and the hundreds of tremors that people were experiencing. People sleeping out every night, people worried about all of these tremors. And so they delivered a press conference in L'Aquila, which was highly unusual in that time. The chief bureaucrat in that panel, De Bernardinis, was asked a number of questions about how dangerous the situation was. He said that the seismic situation in L'Aquila was certainly normal and posed no danger, adding that the scientific community continues to assure me that, to the contrary, it's a favorable situation because of the continuous discharge of energy. Oh, that's got strong truthiness. That's strong truthiness there. It feels very believable. I'd be continuous discharge of energy. I'd believe it. A journalist said, "Should we relax? Should we have a nice glass of wine?" And De Bernardino said, "Absolutely," and urged the locals to have a glass of the local Montepulciano. I don't know if it's nice or not. I assume it's nice. Vittorini was the man at the beginning talking about how his father used to take them out as kids and sleep in the square. He's a 48-year-old surgeon. Surgeons follow scientific advice, one assumes. Has lived in L'Aquila all his life. He'll never forgive himself for breaking with tradition on the night of the 5th of April 2009. The town shook with a strong magnitude 3.9 tremor before 11 p.m. Vittorini debated with his wife Claudia and his terrified 9-year-old daughter Fabrizia whether to spend the rest of the night outside. Remember, they had spent nearly every night for the past 3 or 4 months. But these government scientists, they said we should have a glass of wine and relax. Vittorini persuaded his family to remain in their apartment on Via Luigi Sturzo. All 3 of them were huddled together in the master bed when at 3:32 on the 6th of April, a devastating magnitude 6.3 earthquake struck the city. "309 people were killed, including Vittorini's daughter and his wife. 40,000 people were made homeless. Should the National Risk Assessment team face consequences for their advice? I'm going to put you in breakout rooms, and I will upload this quickly so you can grab the quotes from the Wattle page. But I want to put you in breakout rooms and discuss for 10 minutes what you think should be the consequences faced by the National Risk Assessment team for that advice. What should be the consequences and why? I'll put you in larger breakout rooms this time. Recreate. No, other way. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I can see you were all talking up to the wire there in discussing this. I would love to spend a lot more time with this because it's such a fascinating example, such a horrific example. But yeah. Do you want to know what happened, or do you want to tell me what you think should happen to these scientists?
Well, I'm hoping they got acquitted, Will.
But not allowed any alcohol for the rest of their lives.
No more wine.
No
Also, consult with engineers, not just seismologists next time.
Look, I didn't give you all of the full details. There were engineers on the panel. So Dubonadis was an engineer as well. So just to cut it short, initially, the 6 scientists, the 6 people on the risk assessment team, of whom all had scientific backgrounds and 5 were employed as scientists, were convicted of manslaughter and given 6 years in prison each. Eventually, on appeal, all of them were overturned except for Dubonadis, who held a 2-year reduced jail time sentence. I want to read a quote here. This is from the judge in the first trial, so where they were convicted. The scientists, he said, were guilty not of failing to predict the quake, but of failing to discharge their duties under the law. The judge concluded that 29 of the victims fatally changed their behaviour as a direct result of the committee's reassurances. Should they go to jail?
We were talking about the fact that whether that one person was just, pulling a bit of a trump with the disinfectant injections, like just speaking a bit out of turn analogy. And not necessarily with the consensus of the whole group.
Yeah, great analogy. And something I wonder a lot about, the fact that none of the scientists spoke up. When someone says something knowingly untrue or that you know to be untrue, and you don't speak up, and you're on a physical panel, you're literally there. If you don't say, "Oh, excuse me, I don't think we should inject bleach," and if someone does inject bleach, someone does change their behaviour not to sleep in the square, are you culpable, or should you speak up?
The behaviour we walk past is the behaviour we accept.
Indeed. Yeah, and as Justin's saying, Trump does hedge a lot. He doesn't say in declarative ways. So he may not be as liable as this. So I think this is an interesting case for us because we as science communicators and scientists want the rest of the world to listen to us, and that bears responsibility if we are listened to. And there are many scenarios in Australia where we will attempt to change people's behaviour, and I would hope always for life-preserving, life-saving sorts of things. But that bears risks as well. If our advice is flawed or problematic, then where should we be, and how should we deal with consequences of that? Any other things that you observed when you were talking? Do most of you saying, "Oh, they shouldn't go to jail because they can't predict an earthquake," or other people saying, "Look, they gave advice that made people change their behaviour"?
I think our group was talking a lot about what evidence was actually used for the risk assessment team to actually make their decision, because that would change our decision on whether or not they should be culpable.
And yes, and I can't give you all of that right now. I can give that they were based on official seismographic records, and of course that knowledge that 2% of tremor situations lead to a large quake, because that was known. Whether they were taking attention on the radar. But I guess the thing with earthquakes is, there never is certainty. And I think the problem is that this panel provided more certainty than they should have done. They said it was safer than they should have done. Justin?
Yeah, our group seemed fairly unanimous that the main problem was that they said there was lots of certainty. They said there was no danger. They said that all the scientists were in agreement. And that doesn't seem to be representing it accurately. And that was really what put people in danger. You could have had the bureaucrat stand up, give advice on how you should respond to earthquakes if they do happen, and then step aside and let a scientist represent the scientific fact. To have one bureaucrat addressing all the journalists is not particularly good form.
Cool. Sean?
Yeah, that idea that the advice is the message that everyone's trying to listen to for, and so everything that comes before it, the justification and so on. But as soon as you hear the advice, it doesn't matter what sort of came before it. And there's a lot of ways. There was a back when we had the hung election and Julia Gillard came into power, we had some independents get up and basically say why they were giving their vote to Julia Gillard, and it was 15 minutes, and nobody cared about that 15 minutes. They wanted to know what was happening at the end. And as soon as they said, "Oh yeah, Gillard," everyone forgot what was said in the previous 15 minutes.
I think that's absolutely true, and I think that. But there's one bit of detail that I think will stick in people's head here in the earthquake case. Sorry, I'm getting. Who am I getting? Let's just mute. So I think there is the final bit of evidence. Should we relax? That's the final. What should we do? And I think people took that, but I think there was also that bit. Scientists assure me that there is a discharge of energy here, which to me that has that plausible scientific. I would believe it. I would guaranteed believe that and say, yeah, it's discharging energy, because it is. It is. The reason I feel like this is I think I would potentially change my behavior based on this. I don't know. Belinda.
Yeah, I was just thinking that it kind of, there's a power issue. Like if you don't give the public that complexity of information, they're disempowered.
Yep.
And that's what I found kind of the most interesting thing. If you give them one piece of advice without any of the complexity that people talked about before, then you have removed any of their power to make.
Yep.
I think that's where the culpability lies.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Raina.
Yeah, I wanted to say about the same thing about local knowledge. It's probably worthwhile respecting in a situation like that where people have lived there for a long time, and it may be worthwhile listening to them and see what they have to say and what their experience is, because they might just know something. The other thing is, because I do risk assessment in government, and in that situation, often I can just, it's almost like I could be in that room. Those scientists were possibly brought along for window dressing. They were there, they were there deliberately to deliver a message to have an effect. It was a political thing they did. And the scientist's role was there to sit there and not talk unless there was a technical issue they wanted them to talk about. Now, you could argue that they should have spoken up, and in that situation, they probably ethically should have done that. But, I don't know if you guys ever go to Senate estimates, they drag everyone along to that, including the scientists, and you sit there and you're only asked to speak when you're asked to speak, to put something in, and you sit there and they say something, you're going, shit, that's wrong. Why did you say that? But there isn't, at that point, it's not your role to say anything, or at least that's the way the rules run. I think that's dangerous. So we should think about that. That's a good
Absolutely,
lesson.
Raina. Absolutely, Raina. Incredibly hard to speak out of turn, particularly when so many of you think, oh, okay, they've stuffed up a tiny bit in that statement, ignoring this particular one, but there will be many occasions where the lead spokesperson will miss some tiny detail, and you think, oh, does that matter? Does that matter? A, I have to keep my job, but also B, we're thinking about the bigger risk assessment picture. Which bits matter? It's to castigate these scientists and say, oh, you should have spoken up. That's really hard, but it's really tough. I mean, the one going back to Trump, Trump keeps saying this is we're much better than 1917, blah blah blah, 1917. What he means is the Spanish flu that happened in 1918. But no one corrects him on that. And I think what is our duty here? Should we correct on the tiny things, or should we correct on the big things and say, hey, don't put bleach in you? It's so tough. Simon.
It's this really made me think about the situation we're in now with COVID and how a statistic has been thrown around quite a bit about once in a century. which is like a 1% chance.
Mhm.
So I was sort of thinking in relation to this situation, saying 2% is actually meaningless because the expectation is so great for that 2%. So really, if it was the situation where this is a 1 in 50 year occurrence, it gets people thinking like, okay, so it might not happen, but you should always be prepared. And it
Absolutely.
communicates that statistic much better than 2%, where people think 2%, well, that's 2 away from 0, so I can relax.
Yeah.
So I think they absolutely failed on the maths there.
I agree.
And it's
I agree.
also that that thing with the coin tossing where people forget that when they do say 2%, perhaps they mean every situation, not like, oh, we've had so many this year and now it sort of has an impact on the next one. It's like, no, every time is going to have its new sort of risk and probabilities involved. So I think, as someone in our group mentioned, I think as a science communicator, it's really tough because a lot of people don't understand probability very well.
Yep.
And I think that goes right back to sort of school age children being taught it properly, because it can have disastrous consequences.
The thing I wonder about probability, in some senses, I think we can only understand probability in the abstract. When you go, okay, you know, in 100 of these scenarios, it'll happen twice. Or, you know, it's you know, we can see it in the casino. We say, you sit down, you play 100 games of blackjack, and this is what will happen. You know, we can understand that. But we don't live in probability. We live in a world where we make a decision right there, right now on this, which is based on some sorts of assessments. You know, if you said 100% going to happen, 0% not going to happen, yeah, we use that information. But there's a whole bunch of other things going through our heads. I'm tired of going out into the piazza. Maybe this is discharging. We don't live based on a probabilistic assessment. Our brains don't work that way. Timing there, Rory. That's all right.
And Will, can I just add to that as well? It shouldn't actually be probabilities. It should be expectation value.
Yeah.
Which is one of the things they missed out, because it's 2% for a complete tragedy occurring. And that you have to combine those two to really kind of get across what that means.
It's a bit like the boy who cried wolf. Like,
indeed.
they just, yeah.
Boy. Had a lot of laughs. I don't know. I forget the ending.
It's
Daniel.
a bit like bush. Oh, sorry.
Oh, it's all right, Susan. You go.
Curious, I mean, and this is not super relevant. Well, it's sort of relevant, but I'm just curious whether it has anything to do with also, like their reaction has anything to do with the fact that we're very, as a public, very unforgiving. And I'm not suggesting that you know, I don't think they're without their, they didn't do the wrong thing, but I'm just curious if people were more accepting of the fact that, hey, you can retract on a statement that you made in the public. Like if you came out and did this press conference and you realized that there was some serious issues with it, when you went back and discussed it as a professional group afterwards, you could come back and say, hey, just want to reiterate something, or we want to just highlight that this may have come out wrong, and we want to just like press on this issue. But you never really see that. And I guess it reminds me of what's going on currently in Melbourne and with COVID. Like there's some issues that they may have made mistakes about, but instead of sort of coming out and being like, hey, we made a mistake here, this is what we've learned from it, and we're going to, you know, orientate ourselves around this way, there is this sort of like just silence a little bit. And I wonder if that then plays into the distrust cycle a little bit, and why they have to use. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. So one thing that strikes me about this is I didn't get to this point of the story, but there's a phone call that was part of the prosecution's thing where Dima Bernardinus was speaking with his boss a couple of days before the earthquake, saying, "Oh, we've got to get out there and we've got to calm the situation." And at that point, their goals clearly seem to be more about calming. You know, that there's panic, they're worried about panic, and the citizen scientists detecting things. They thought that panic would be more of a problem than an earthquake or dealing with it. And so I think we've got to remember, you know, I think there's multiple things going on, and I think it's if we should clarify things all the time, but sometimes our goals pull in different directions. I don't know. And clearly it does parallel with, what's happening in Melbourne at the moment. We'll just take 2 more comments from Ali and Helen, and then I'm going to pivot to talking about what we're going to be doing. So Ali?
Yeah, I just wanted to think about, if this earthquake didn't happen and there wasn't this tragedy, people wouldn't care at all that they said something that was, a little bit negligent. And I think let's swing the situation around and let's say that they didn't make this statement, there was no earthquake, but there was that panic. People would say, why didn't they do anything to calm down the situation? Like, obviously, I agree that it was a bit negligent to say that there was no risk. They should have come out and said something like, here's what you should do if there is something that happens. Don't panic, do this instead. Yeah. But it's kind of like the only reason we're talking about it, or the only reason we care is because it did have this circumstance. Otherwise, it would have just gone with the myriad of other negligent kind of misrepresenting the information statements that are thrown out every single day,
Look, I mean, yeah, absolutely. There are countless examples of spokespeople, scientists, bureaucrats, politicians, otherwise, giving advice that people take that hasn't ended in tragedy, and then they're not prosecuted, and then we don't know about them, and then we don't talk about them in class. This one did. So it's tough. It's really tough. Should they be the ones that are prosecuted? So I think the example for us here in Australia is to think, okay, we clearly, like every country, has natural disaster risks. But if you were to be out there and talk on fires or COVID or cyclones or anything like that, how we talk about it does matter. Helen?
I have a question and I have an observation. So observation-wise first, people are notoriously bad at understanding what high impact, low probability events actually mean. Getting back to that whole idea of probability, it's like 100-year floods. You can get 200-year floods 2 years in a row. It's quite possible, but people they get complacent because they're like, oh yeah, we had one of those last year. It's not going to happen for a while, right? And so people have really, really poor understanding of risk, especially in this sort of infrequent event circumstance. The other thing that I have is more of a question. I seem to remember in reading about this case a couple of years ago, Will, that actually Italian officials tried to silence the citizen scientist because he was sowing dissent.
So I believe so. I believe there was. Let me go. So, I mean, this was Guido Bertolaso, head of Italy's Department of Civil Protection Agency, was very worried about the population of L'Aquila. And they were basing this very much, they deemed that Giuliani's findings were unsatisfactory, which, it adds to the sort of what's going on in this thing, that they're thinking, okay, what's going on? So I think, I'm not quite sure how they tried to silence him, but I think it was definitely in there. All right, Sarah, do you want to add something quick? And then we're going to pivot.
I just wanted to ask, I was debating whether I should ask, did they maintain that they thought, well, they're like, oh, we're just trying to calm people down. Did they maintain that in their defense? That, no, it was my job. I was given the brief to calm panic, not to do this.
So that was definitely part of the prosecutor's argument, that they were attempting to calm people when there wasn't grounds for calming. So that's why things like the phone call where, from the boss, where they were saying, oh, we've got to calm the situation down, was included. I don't know if the defendants then said, okay, that's a legitimate thing to do. I think the argument is that, yes, it might be legitimate, but it's subsidiary to making sure that you're giving satisfactory advice about the risk situation. Anyway,
thank you.
Very much something that I think we should think about. I think it's an ongoing challenge that we all in science communication should pay attention to. All right. So these slides and the L'Aquila slides are up in the Dropbox now, if you want to look at them, but you can definitely look at them later. So where I just want to finish this class today now is looking at how we can think about persuasion when we're writing opinion pieces or other things, to try and get an idea of what it is that will persuade people and what we'll be looking for in the assessment. So we've done that. All right, first thing, just a reminder, undergraduates, three rounds for you. postgraduates, 4 rounds for you. So you choose these topics. You don't have to tell me which ones you're doing in advance. I have had some people asking me, can I do all 6 and I just pick the best? Unfortunately, we don't have the marking budget to cover that. You got to pick the ones that you're going to do. You can choose them in any order you want. It's entirely up to you. In terms of ignoring the questions for experts and the literature review, we can come back to that later. But what we're looking for is an opinion editorial style piece of writing for a relevant outlet targeted towards a relevant audience. Or you can write directly to a stakeholder or a decision maker on that case. Or you can write something alternate to that, but again, you have to fit these criteria. So the criteria we'll be working on is, the first thing that I want to draw on is actually the third point in this slide, appropriate audience or venue. I want you to think about who can be convinced or should be convinced on any particular matter. So that may be a certain group of people in society to change their behavior or change how they might vote or change how they might think about things. Or it may be a particular minister or something like that. But I want you very much to target anything you are doing to an audience. Now, we can understand that audience, as I said before, demographically or in terms of values, but we can't write things off into the air, because the things that will convince me will be different to the things that convince you, will be different to the things that convince anyone else out there. So flipping back to the other criteria, what we want to have is a clear answer to the question or a clear argument that you are saying Australia should do this or Australia shouldn't do that. So what are we doing? Bike helmets next week. So it could be Australia should abandon mandatory bike helmet legislation, or other countries should take up mandatory bike helmet legislation, or we can come somewhere in the middle. We should do different sorts of mandatory bike helmet legislation. I want to know that you have a clear argument or answer about that. Secondly, I want you to use evidence to support that. Not just cherry picking the evidence. So if all of the evidence is pointing in the different direction, that's tough to do. But I want you to say, the reason I am raising this argument is that this evidence shows me this evidence shows me this evidence shows me that. You can, of course, and you should, deal with contradictory evidence. So if you're arguing, yes, we should have mandatory bike helmet laws, then include the evidence that says that, but you should also look at the evidence that says, oh no, mandatory bike helmet laws cause these problems. If you don't deal with the contradictory evidence, then your opinion piece is weaker. Appropriate venue. Oh, and just on appropriate venue, at the very top, write on it. Write on it. This is an opinion piece that would be submitted to The Australian or Mamma Mia, or, and we'll go through to more venues in a bit. Finally, is the writing clear? Is it appropriate in tone to, yes, you can totally submit to Breitbart if you want. Is the tone appropriate to that venue? So for example, if you wanted to submit to BuzzFeed, it would use a very different tone from The Australian, which would use a very different tone from, I don't know, Miners Monthly. Quick questions on that? We'll come back to that. Cricket Australia, definitely, if there's a reason to, I mean, I'm not sure if they have much of a stake in mandatory bike helmet laws, but there may be a topic that Cricket Australia would be relevant to. Fox News would be relevant to a lot of things. All of them are relevant. I'm very happy for you to think broadly about that. Now, we're not going to do this when was the last time you were persuaded of something, but I do want you to think about what persuades you. Same with the time traveler and same with the L'Aquila case. What does persuade you of things? What gets you to change your behavior? So here's a variety of things that you might look, outlets that you might look at. You can find anyone that you want. If you write it really well, you could always then go and submit it to those people afterwards. I will take anything that is relevant to an audience. If you can argue that this outlet connects with this audience and there's a relevant case there, then go to. If I don't know what the outlet is, as in if it's fairly obscure, it doesn't hurt to add in like 20 words just saying, oh, they cover mining news for Queensland or something like that. Now, of course, how you choose an outlet depends on a couple of things, but what you are trying to do is get an audience based on their demographics or their values, and their values if possible. This chart just gives you a brief little idea of some of the outlets in Australia. You don't have to go with that high quality to poor quality, but the way that they lean left or right will give some idea of demographics and values that might orient towards these different audiences. But there are other ways of choosing as well. So have a look at those. For example, if you were trying to convince readers of mandatory bike helmet laws, you would argue quite differently in Quadrant or The Spectator as to Vice or Junkie. So how do you structure it? Grace, do you have a question? Yeah.
Yes, so if we're doing a poor quality outlet, for example, would we be expected to sort of play up our own biases and that of the audience and not do the best, or is it more that we avoid those entirely?
So I would ignore the poor quality, high quality on this chart. But what I would say is they are more partisan, and be the better version of them is what I'd say. So for example, if you were writing for Quadrant or The Spectator, what I would say is match their tone, match the sorts of arguments they make in terms of who they're pitching to. You know, Quadrant have a fairly old demographic, a fairly very conservative demographic. Don't be like their worst versions and just cherry pick all the evidence. Be their best version and show how the evidence matches what you're saying, if possible. So yes, they might have what the high quality to poor quality means is probably those things that are in the high quality bucket have fewer examples of bad evidence or not using evidence adequately. The people down the bottom have more examples of not using evidence well or using bad evidence. But they all do have examples of doing it well and doing it poorly. Just do it well. But the tone is the more important thing here. Kim.
Yeah, I have two questions. So
Yes.
firstly, you talked about evidence just now, right? So do we need to have references for those evidence?
Cool.
So that's my first question. And the second one is, if I were to write for outlet in my country, which is Singapore,
Yes.
Is it possible, like as in if I want to recommend mandatory bike helmet laws for him?
Perfect. Yes, absolutely. You can choose any country in the world or any outlet in the world. I'm very happy. Give me a tiny explanation of what they are. Just if I haven't heard them, give me that explanation. But I'm very happy for you to tailor these topics to particular countries that are other than Australia. But what I would say is you do need to look up, okay, what is the situation with mandatory bike helmet laws in Singapore? And then say, okay, in Australia, I've just seen that they have mandatory bike helmet laws. I think that would be great in Singapore. And then you raise the evidence and set it out for a Singaporean audience. So you be very much, imagine if this was on the Straits Times or something like that. Tell us how that evidence would work. And I'm very keen on that. So yes, I mean, all of the topics that I've chosen are actually topics that countries or every country in the world, it makes sense to at least think about. You know, some countries are there, some countries are there, but they're all challenges. You know, how we safely get around is a challenge that every country faces. On references, good point. So there's a bit of information in Wattle on this. I want you to reference, but I want you to reference in ways that are seen in those outlets. So for example, instead of putting it in APA format or Harvard format or something like that, you might say, if you're writing an opinion piece for any of the newspapers, you might say, a recent study out of ANU has shown this, blah, blah, blah. And then just at the bottom, put a bibliography just so I know which one it is. But in the text, you don't have to put a citation. You just put a recent study out of ANU, or a recent Australian study shows this, or recent study in the journal of such and such. You've got to keep it in the format that would be published. But they definitely use that sort of format. They might say, latest science has just suggested this new thing. Helen.
So Will, devil's advocate. If you, for example, wanted to go and argue that bike helmets are a waste of time in a media outlet style that typically would be supportive of bike helmets, how do you feel about that?
Look, first of all, I'm very happy with anyone doing a devil's advocate argument. I don't care what you actually believe. I'm caring about your use of evidence. Second thing, you've got a couple of choices. If you want to argue about mandatory bike helmet laws, you can imagine 3 different types of audiences. 1, they already agree with you, and this is great. 2, they haven't thought about it very much and they're on the fence. 3, they already hate you and they hate your argument. All of those are legitimate choices, but you'd have to choose a very different way of addressing them and talking to them and trying to convince them. So, for example, people that hate the argument already, you might have to start off going, okay, I get you've heard this argument before. You've heard hippies like me saying they just want to let their hair blow in the breeze, so that shouldn't be forced to wear mandatory bike helmets. But actually, there's some science in here that maybe you should think about as we force people to wear helmets. So what you're doing is you're addressing where they are in terms of their values. Can't get my finger to line up. Values. And then trying to convince them based on other things they do care about. So maybe there's something else they do care about. If it's a pro public health blog, they might say, yes, of course, mandatory helmets save lives, but we are worried about people not getting involved in active transport very much. So address their values and see if you can convince them of the first point based on their second point. Simon.
So if you were writing something for like something was quite right-leaning, and you were using evidence from ANU, so it'd be okay to frame it like left-leaning ANU research has done something good for once. I mean, is that being too forceful? But it's kind of like trying to manipulate the audience in a way.
Yeah.
Look, you certainly could. You certainly could. I mean, manipulate the audience is the goal. Your goal is to persuade them. That means get them to think something that they otherwise wouldn't think. And yeah, maybe they have a hostility to universities. I don't know. Some conservative outlets don't like the people in universities, but they like the existence of universities. So don't push it too far. Yeah. But you can definitely do that. Belinda.
Be creative.
Sorry?
What do you mean by be creative? One of the criteria.
Yeah.
Particularly if you're writing to a government audience. So yeah, in the writing.
Okay. So this is not a criteria that you can have an excellent opinion piece that is not super creative and get an excellent mark. Don't worry about it breaking the bank here. If you are being very straight, that's completely fine. However, if you do something that is very different and weird, a weird way of connecting with an audience that doesn't quite do the other things, but suddenly I'm changing my mind because you've played a mind trick on me, then I'll happily give that a good mark. Basically, what I'm looking it's bonus points for if you do something weird that is creative that does connect through. So I guess what I'd say here is thinking back to this question. When was the last time you changed your mind? When was the last time you were persuaded of something? What was it? Was it something very straightforward? It might have been. You looked up the evidence and you said, oh, finally I've found that this is 90% rather than 89%, so I'll do this thing. Maybe it was that, or maybe it was a story, or maybe it was something that was really creative that connected with you, that made you change your mind. So creativity is not a requirement, but it may change something into a great assessment piece. Does that make sense? Belinda.
That was me. I'll put my hand down.
Excellent then. Sarah.
I just wanted to ask, in terms of marking these and getting the marks back, because I know, like, for example, some people might do all 3 or all 4 of theirs in the first few weeks, and then other people will submit right at the end of the semester. Are you giving marks back once everyone's sort of done, or is there like okay.
No, our goal will be to get marks back to you a week after submission, which does mean if you're doing the one the week after, you probably won't have feedback yet, but you will have it for the one afterwards. So if it's submitted Friday midnight, our goal will be to get the feedback to you by Friday midnight.
Okay, thank you.
All right. That was Sarah, right? Susan.
Thanks. Like with the creative, could you do a limerick if you wanted to?
If a limerick could get me to change my mind on something, that'd be awesome.
Okay, great. And the other question I had a bit of overlap is, like, I'd done an infographic around masks for the web science subject. So are you allowed to overlap?
Sure. Yeah, I don't mind you overlapping. I mean, if you're, but remember this, you know, what we're looking for here is you taking an argument, well, taking an argument to a group of people. And, you know, so you might go to Mamma Mia and say, this is what I reckon. And I've used this infographic here or something that might help, but.
No, it's just mainly I've done all the reading. So just,
Oh, no, I don't mind that. I don't mind that.
Thanks.
Mitchell.
I just wanted to try pushing the special snowflake button real quick. Are we able to pitch to you other topics if we're interested in writing about them?
Potentially better to do in 6005. If you want to do that, shoot me an email and we can work something out there. Because what I need you to do is do the process of the lit review and the question to the expert. But shoot me an email and we might be able to work out somewhere where we can do something different.
It's not end of the world. It's just an idea that popped in. That's all. Cool. Thanks.
Ruby.
I was just wondering if the opinion piece needed to be the same topic as we choose for the collaborative literature and question for experts. So say, got to choose 3 or 4. Do we have to?
I kind of want them to be the same because I need that you're basing it on experts and basing it on evidence. But to be honest, I won't actually know because for the question for experts, you put your hat in the ring and you get a point if you put your hat in the ring. Similarly, if you do your lit review and then you decide, I don't want to do this topic, I'll do a different topic, then I won't actually know. So there you go.
Thank you.
I would recommend keeping them the same.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Helen.
If we do all 6, do we just get the best 3 or 4?
Unfortunately, we can't do that. I'd love to be able to, but that has big implications on our marketing budget.
Thanks.
Amelia.
Yeah, just in terms of, I was thinking about the creative aspect. So things like an infographic, or, you know, how some opinion pieces and things, they'll have an illustration to go along with it to kind of, I guess, capture the feel of that article. Is that kind of allowed to do an accompanying thing like that?
Absolutely. Yes, it definitely could. I guess think back to the time traveler. Is there a moment here where an infographic might help? Potentially, yes. But what we need to do is understand their values, understand what bits of information will convince them, and remember that sometimes, you know, how the X-ray machine works or the physics of it is not necessarily the best thing. So yes, you could definitely do other creative things. Pictures, infographics, absolutely. But remember, think about, okay, how do I reach that audience and what would be the thing that will change their mind?
Great, thanks.
Was that you, Amelia?
Yep, that was me.
I'm losing track of hands here. Susan.
Just, do we load this up in the discussion group, the question and lit review in the email thing in Wattle, or do we actually have to put it through Turnitin?
It has to go through Turnitin. Yeah, unless you're doing some sort of video, if you want, put a link to it in Turnitin or something like that.
Okay. So in a lot of the discussions at the moment, there's a lot of people that have put it in the discussion group there. Yeah,
the lit review goes in the discussion forum. So hang on, I'll just flip to a different share screen. What do I want? No, that's the one I want. too many windows open. Here we go. Okay, so within each week, so here's the bike helmets. So put your literature in the collaborative literature link, and then email me your question. Is that the best way to do that? Yeah, email me your question or ask it in class and let me know that you're going to ask it in class. And then the opinion pieces go in here. I'll think about the question actually, but the literature goes into here and the opinion piece goes in here. And Kim.
Sorry, I think I accidentally raised my hand.
Sure, no worries. Ali.
Are we allowed, if we've already got affiliations with certain outlets that we've written for in the past or are currently writing for, are we allowed to write a piece that would be for those ones, or is it better to do something different?
No, absolutely. The only thing I'd say is, look, if you wanted to get something published and you've got an affiliation, like I could get this up in whatever outlet that you have a connection with, by all means, I'd love to see you get it published. The only thing I'd say is I would like you to mix it up a little bit, in the sense of don't do the same outlet every time. Choose,
okay.
if you can, choose 3 different outlets, choose 4 different outlets. I won't be able to actually track that super well, but yeah, just think about that as much as you can.
And the other question was, you kind of answered it before. So video is okay if we want to do something with that? Okay.
But still, you've got to think about the audience and think about how you would actually get it to them. So for example, you know, a video question for Q&A might be really interesting, but a video that just sits on the internet, I don't have an understanding of their audience or anything like that, or the project or something like that. Susan. Susan?
No, I'm good. Will.
Good.
Thank you.
Sarah.
This is a silly question, but I'm just confused of timelines. So is it due the week before the Monday that we talk about it?
It's just due by Monday morning. So what I would recommend is when you're choosing the topic that happens next Monday morning, sometime during the week, you think about your literature review and you send me a question to ask the expert, just so long as I've got them by 9:30 Monday morning. And then you write your opinion piece and submit it by Friday night. Simon.
Is it worth referencing other articles in the publication that you're writing for?
Definitely. And particularly, you might respond to something. You might say, okay, last week you published this article by whoever, and they're a bit of an idiot because they got it all wrong, and here's the right answer. And that's great. Outlets love a discussion. They love when you reference something that they've done before, whether you agree or disagree. Awesome. All right. What I just want to finish on is some ideas about how you might structure an opinion piece. Now, we're going to do these quickly, but you'll be able to go straight from here and have a look at these up in Wattle. But the first thing I'd say is have a look at opinion pieces that work for you and copy it. You know, there's a lot of advice out there about opinion pieces, but look at the ones that convince you. Here's a few examples of mine that I published in a couple of different places. Using a variety of different formats, trying to convince different audiences of different things. So for example, that first one, the conversation is a very academically oriented audience. 7 things to keep in mind if you're going to March for Science. So there was that science march a few years ago. So it's an audience, I've connected with that and trying to convince them of a different way of looking at what's going on in the science march. So have a look at some of those and see if they help to understand what's going on. Now, a few quick tips. These are in the slides, so you don't need to write these down. Avoid headlines that are a question. Instead, try to articulate some sort of statement on your position. In real life, the editors control the headlines, but at least write one so that you've got an idea. Daniel, did you have a question now, or do you want to ask it later?
I'll ask it later.
Cool. All right. Open with a strong first line. Try and grab your attention. A couple of ways of doing that. One, you might you might say what your argument is straight away. Mandatory bike helmet laws are awesome. Mandatory bike helmet laws are terrible. Or you might open with a strong story. You might say, my cousin had a terrible bike crash, something like that. Whatever you want to do, you want to start in a way that, as much as possible, grabs your reader's attention. You want to grab them and keep them going all the way to the end. You aren't just there to help. You're there to change their mind. You may have to be pushy. You may have to be pushy to make people change their mind. You may have to use emotional leverage or evidentiary leverage to make people think something different to what they already think. You have a limited number of words, so don't try and cover every single aspect. Oh, just on word count, copy what is required by these outlets. So for example, if you're writing a letter to the newspaper, they probably only publish 100 to 200 words. If you're writing an opinion piece, 600 to 800 words. Some blogs might allow longer. They might allow 1,000, 1,200 or 500. I want you to use the word count that they use. Choose the most important bits of the evidence, most important bits of the argument, rather than detailing everything about it. So for example, you might convince people on mandatory bike helmet laws more about the impact on society or on health or whatever, rather than letting their hair blow in the breeze, maybe. Like the first thing, put your best stuff in there early. Don't wait to conclude with an awesome conclusion. Put everything in early so that people get to it, and then they might, have a good conclusion as well. Be active. Conversational is better than formal. You can use the word I. It may help quite a lot. Short paragraphs are good. Long paragraphs get harder and harder to read. You're going to be more active, more persuasive if your paragraphs are short. Don't assume that the data alone will convince people. Don't ignore data, don't ignore evidence, but very much look for ways that stories can be added into the data. Blend the two of them. Teaching is not persuasion. Grab them emotionally and make them think about how they can change their mind. This is a pretty decent one. 10 tips on writing an opinion piece people read. There's plenty others out there. All of these comments apply similarly to if you were to write a letter to a minister. Main difference is you're going to need to keep it formal and address that minister in a certain sort of way. But all of them, what you want to be doing is looking at your tone, keeping it appropriate to that audience, and seeing how you can convince them to change their minds. Okay, any questions? Did you want to go now, Daniel?
My question is more about the question to the expert, so I'm happy to wait until we're finished with this.
Okay. Sarah.
Did someone put in the chat whether Friday was Sunday? Now I'm confused. Friday is Friday.
Technically, Friday is Sunday. Well, actually, technically, Friday is 8:59 a.m. Monday morning. ANU doesn't really believe in computers being able to tell the time over the weekend. So when you have the deadline for these is 11:59 p.m. Friday night. However, because a late penalty applies per business day, there are no business days until 8:59 a.m. Monday morning. So yes, you get a free 2 days if you want. Late penalties don't start until 9:01 Monday morning.
It's an easy concept, but it hurts my head to think about. Thank you.
I know, and you know what? Computers don't need weekends, so. Daniel, do you want to ask your question about the? Yeah, and you do, Zoe. So get your assessment in on time.
Yep,
Daniel.
I'm happy to ask.
Yep.
So I was just like looking at the speaker for, or the guest for the one of the weeks, and it's like they're talking about the particular topic, but they also have a discipline in another, like, you know, have a different expertise in different discipline. So can you ask them about their discipline as well? So, you know, say with the bike question, can I actually ask this, because the person I think is got, you know, a professor in communications, media, can you ask them something specific about media and communications, or does it need to be on topic?
Oh, look, sure, that's fine. I mean, what we want to do is use the hour and a half that we have with them as best as possible. That's going to help your opinion piece. If there's a question that you think might, you know, that might flesh out the topic in a different way, obviously his expertise comes from a communication background and then thinking about public safety and communication. So absolutely. Your job then is to ask the most useful question for you in terms of understanding what you can do in your opinion piece. Where am I? There, Sarah.
Yeah, I lost my train of thought. Disregard me.
That's cool. All right then. I see no further hands, but email me if you have any questions. Happy to chat. Otherwise, we dive in. We start exploring these topics, see how they weave together, and how evidence may convince us of things or it may not. See you all next week.
Thanks, Will. Thanks, Will. Bye.
Thanks, Will. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Will.
Thank you.
Thanks, Will.
Thanks, Will. Hey, Will, can I ask you a quick question? Is it all right if I ask you, Will?